Well, from today, please take care of all 7 of us. As I opened the front door, there stood my son, whom I hadn't seen for several months. Behind him, his wife and children stood with large bags. Telling him it was unreasonable to suddenly show up at his parents' house with so many people. My son was unfazed. His attitude, as he barged in, ignoring my protests, was nothing short of terrifying. Why had my son returned? A few months ago, after criticizing my son and his wife for their extravagant spending, it was my son who called me a greedy old lady and cut ties with me. My son, significantly stronger than me, easily pushed the door open and entered the house. You know we don't have rooms for 7, right? So? My son stretched out his arms straight and grabbed my shoulders tightly. To me, wincing in pain, he said with a cheerful smile, "When you're done with cleaning and laundry, Mom, you can sleep in the hallway." My name is Susan, a 75-year-old woman living on a pension, just an ordinary woman. Before getting married, I worked diligently at a company. I enjoyed my job at the beginning, and since there were many women around, there was an understanding for women working overtime. At that time, there was a societal expectation that women would become homemakers upon marriage. However, my company wanted me to stay because I was working hard, asking me if I could continue. Though I found my job rewarding, my husband wanted me to be a full-time housewife. So I quit my job upon getting married. I took pride in cooking, always putting extra effort into my dishes to make them as good as those made by professionals. I always aspired to spend more time cooking. Becoming a housewife allowed me to spend more time on my hobby, sewing, which secretly made me very happy. Nathan was my only child, but I cherished the time spent with my child and husband. I was happy when Nathan was clingy in his early childhood and primary school years. He became distant during his rebellious phase in middle school. But he was fortunate to have good friends. Nathan's best friend from middle school is still in touch with him. In high school, influenced by his friends or maybe considering college, Nathan started focusing more on his studies. My husband, despite his old-fashioned views, was supportive in parenting, making child-rearing enjoyable. I was blessed with mom friends, with whom I could discuss how to handle our children during their high school and college entrance exams, what advice to give, and how to support them to concentrate on their studies. I paid for most of the wedding expenses since Nathan had not saved enough. My husband worked hard, ensuring we had a stable income, so we lived a comfortable life. My husband, always diligent at work and parenting, passed away from illness 5 years ago. Now, I live alone, supported by a pension and the savings my husband left behind. Using my sewing skills, I create and sell items on flea market sites for extra income. Having enough money and not struggling financially, I enjoy a fulfilling life doing volunteer work with friends and going out for lunch. Enjoying pleasant days. Nathan is now 44 years old, having married and started his own family 17 years ago. His wife, Lindsay, is 40 years old. I remember her as being quiet when they were students, but that impression changed over time. They have 3 children, leading with a 14-year-old grandchild, followed by a 10 and an 8-year-old. Nathan and his wife had a good relationship with me, especially when the grandchildren were younger, without demanding too much. I made sure not to repeat the unpleasant treatment I received from my mother-in-law, avoiding sudden visits and giving money for celebrations so they could buy whatever they liked. I thought we maintained a good distance, but recently, the situation changed dramatically. My daughter-in-law started asking for presents for the grandchildren every week, and for meals at slightly expensive restaurants, without ever showing any intention of paying. Moreover, they always pick expensive restaurants. But having meals there was still somewhat acceptable. Seeing my grandchildren coming along, happily eating and calling the food delicious, made me happy too. Gradually, Lindsay started asking for expensive accessories that a middle schooler wouldn't normally wear. I've known Lindsay since my son's high school days, back when she was a quiet, unassuming girl. It's disheartening to see how brazen she's become. Originally, she wasn't rude, but became domineering the moment she felt she could say anything to me. Relatives began to realize her true nature and gradually cut ties. Now, only those with strong personalities still keep in touch. Lindsay, thinking she could manipulate me, started asking for rings, necklaces, designer wallets, and bags. I've confronted her, asking, "Why do you need such expensive items? Aren't these for your use only?" She insisted it was all for the children. Starting with outfits for elementary school entrance ceremonies, she claimed, "I need this outfit for school visits. Only a designer bag matches this outfit." But I couldn't afford to buy designer bags for such reasons. Ignoring her requests seemed to work, as she didn't ask for more. However, she started targeting things that were harder to refuse. She'd barge in while I was cooking dinner, asking, "Could you make some side dishes for us too?" If I refused, she'd say, "Then, anything you have will do," and help herself to leftovers or newly bought meat from the fridge. Even if I protested, she'd laugh it off, saying, "Thank you so much," and leave as she pleased. It's appalling that a daughter-in-law could do such things. It's common to hear about daughters-in-law being mistreated by their mothers-in-law. But is it normal for a mother-in-law like me to be driven to despair? Demanding a meal for the whole family during an unannounced visit is incredibly presumptuous. And yet, they never show up for memorial services or grave visits. They come for Christmas, demanding money for the grandchildren and devouring the Christmas meal, then leave without visiting the grave or greeting other relatives. Despite repeated warnings, they ignored me one summer. It's the trend now to give money for Christmas and also for Easter. I'm counting on you for all 3 grandchildren. I was furious over their blatant disrespect and lack of offerings to the altar, plus the demand for money. When I finally spoke up, Nathan blatantly sighed and clicked his tongue at me. "After all the trouble of showing grandma to the grandchildren, this is how you talk? Fine then, we won't bother with such an unreasonable grandma again. The unreasonable ones are you guys. Fine, I won't contact you either. Don't ever come back." Lindsay left without a glance, quickly taking the children with her. Since then, the frequent calls stopped, and so did the unexpected visits. My life became busier with sewing and volunteer work, continuing without contact from my son. I enjoyed pleasant, busy days with friends, going out for lunch regularly. Since cutting off contact with my son, I've lived peacefully. My days filled with sewing, volunteering, and lunches with friends were happy. Volunteering, I felt valued when people with disabilities thanked me, which made me very happy. Being sociable and having many friends, my phone often rang with invitations. Hearing the ping of an email, I'd think it might be another invitation, always greeted by heartwarming content. 3 years after the estrangement, my home phone rang for the first time in ages. It was my son. I had immediately blocked his number on my cell phone, but didn't know how to block calls on the landline. After all this time without contact, I wondered what was happening. Picking up the phone, I heard my son's voice. "Hello, Mom?" In the background, I faintly heard my daughter-in-law asking, "Did you get through to your mother?" It seems they were calling together as a couple. Nathan didn't greet me with "How are you?" or "It's been a while." Instead, he chuckled without any hint of remorse, "I need money." As I was about to hang up, disheartened by his request, Nathan's sigh-filled voice reached my ears. "Actually, I've been let go from my job." What? Perhaps it was a mistake to react. Sensing my attention, Nathan rapidly continued. "I got a bit sick and made some mistakes. Made a pretty big blunder and was told to take responsibility. So, I was fired, without even a farewell party. I see. That must have been hard. Keep up the good work. To be honest, I had nothing but indifference. Predicting the next words from my son, who lost his job and was asking for money. I attempted to end the call quickly. However, Nathan's desperate voice kept me on the line. Nathan seemed not to expect a loan. If not money, then let's live together again. What? Mom, you can live happily with your real son and adorable grandchildren. We can save on rent. It's a win-win situation, right? I'll call you back, so please clean the house. Don't joke around. There's no way I could be happy living with you. You were the one who said you wanted to cut ties with me as family. And now you come back because you're in trouble? That's shameless. You should rely on Lindsay, not me. Unable to remain silent at such selfishness, I raised my voice for the first time in a long while. Then, from afar, I heard my daughter-in-law's voice. I'm already working full-time. Even then, we can't make ends meet with 3 kids. So we're hoping you can help. You do love your son and grandchildren, right? No, I don't. Living with you would only result in being treated like a maid and having my money drained. I refuse both cohabitation and financial assistance. Don't contact me again. I slammed down the receiver, only for the phone to ring again incessantly. Annoyed by the continuous ringing, I picked it up during a brief pause, knowing that anyone with real business would call my cell. Yet, the calls from my son and his wife didn't stop. Keeping the receiver off the hook wasn't a solution, it would just invite more attempts to reach out. Growing tired of ignoring them, I called a close friend for advice. Suddenly, I had an idea and called a business-savvy friend on my cell phone. Hello? Could you teach me how to block calls on my landline? 3 months passed in regained peace, with most of the housework settled. I was making a drawstring bag with my sewing when the doorbell unexpectedly rang. Thinking it unusual for the doorbell to ring without an appointment, I checked the monitor displaying the entrance. There, my son and his wife's faces loomed large. Only a bad premonition crossed my mind. Allowing them inside would only lead to more trouble. Intending to send them away, I said, "I'm busy now. Please leave." But my son pleaded, "Don't say that. We've come all this way. We have something important to discuss, please listen." He then gestured behind him to show others. Not only was my son's family there, but Lindsay's parents had come too. In total, 7 people had arrived unannounced, each with carry-on luggage and large bags. Although I might have managed if it were just my son and his wife. The presence of Lindsay's parents made it hard to turn them away without feeling guilty. Worrying about the neighbors' eyes if a commotion ensued at the doorstep, I reluctantly decided to let them into the living room, despite my reservations. I ushered my son, his wife, and Lindsay's parents into the living room, letting the 3 grandchildren play upstairs. Their joyful exclamations of, "This room is so big," echoed down to me. Without any prior discussion, my son immediately suggested, "Mom, let's live together. We've brought our belongings, as you can see." I instinctively replied, "Living together is out of the question. Take your things and go back home." This refusal was unlikely to deter my son easily. My son said with a condescending tone, "Mom, we're trying to be filial by living together. Giving you a purpose in life by taking care of the grandchildren in your old age, that's filial, right?" With a sigh of dismay, I replied, "You know, I'm 75 years old. It's impossible for me to take care of the grandchildren at this age." I was disillusioned that our previous phone conversation, where I had clearly refused, seemed to have been ignored. To be honest, relying on a son who only thinks about himself is the last thing I need. Mother, Nathan is right. Living together will make things easier for you. Seeing your grandchildren every day will make you happy, she insisted. The thought of living with my son's family made me shudder at how much money and effort I would be drained of. Even Lindsay said, "Mother, are you considering your age? Since you don't have much time left, you can enjoy being with your cute grandchildren." I've hardly spoken or seen Lindsay's parents since the wedding greetings. They're staunch Lindsay supporters, probably spoiling their only daughter excessively. And so, Lindsay was probably raised with distorted affection. Then Lindsay's parents added insult to injury by saying, "Hey, Susan. We're both getting on in years, let's work together with our daughters." Typical of Lindsay's parents. Their audacity has significantly influenced her character. Not knowing what kind of life they lead, they seem to regard Lindsay's words as absolute. Nathan, getting carried away by the numbers, joked. "Giving our elderly mother a purpose in life with a bustling family to care for, that's filial, right?" It made me think that Nathan and Lindsay are trying to impose a favor on me, disregarding all that I've done for them before. Forgetting that I've been covering the expenses for the grandchildren, saying, "Because my daughter wants it," or "because my son needs it." And using my money like water, infuriated me. And Lindsay's parents were all too ready to assert that everything Lindsay says should be followed. "Hey, Susan, our Lindsay is a smart girl, let's just go along with what she says," they said with a too bright smile that felt somewhat eerie. That's why I've avoided Lindsay's parents. Their brazenness in coming forward like this, after not meeting since the wedding, felt nothing short of audacious. The audacity, I thought. "Mom, we're here for you, and we'll live together happily. From today, we'll be living in this house," my son said, grinning. He continued, "We'll take your room, so you can sleep in the hallway from now on," laughing as if it was a joke. Lindsay joined in with a smirk, "Mother, we're looking forward to your cooperation." I didn't want to be pushed around by my son's family or Lindsay's parents anymore. Pushing past them, I returned to my room upstairs. Within minutes, I had packed a carry-on bag and came downstairs, surprising my son, his wife, and Lindsay's parents. I announced, "I'm leaving, so do as you please," leaving my son speechless. Nathan asked, "What about the household chores here?" Lindsay also panicked, saying, "Exactly, I thought I would finally be free from housework." Hearing this, I realized they intended to treat me like a maid. Astonished by Nathan's shamelessness for not having a job, and Lindsay's inability to support the family on a part-time job alone, not to mention her parents. Clearly, they were too much for me to handle. I told the couple, "This house is already sold because it became too difficult for me to manage alone. If you want to live here, you'll need to buy it back." They seemed confused by my words. I continued, "I planned to move out 3 months ago and have been preparing since." My son objected, "But there's still stuff in the guest room." I replied, "Those were things I planned to dispose of last. Most items here were unnecessary for the new house. Of course, I'm going to throw away what I don't need. What was necessary, I've already taken to the new place. If you guys want to live here, you'll need to buy the house back. It won't be cheap, given its cleanliness and proximity to the station." In the guest room, with only a carpet and simple decor, my son hadn't noticed the lack of belongings. The only items left in the guest room were meant to be removed by the movers after I had finished moving out all my belongings. That's why there were still some items for hosting guests in there. Then my son and his wife pleaded with me. "Mom, I'm your precious son, right? And the kids, they're your adorable grandchildren." I couldn't help but laugh. I told Nathan, "My dear children disappeared 3 years ago. Why are you telling me this now?" You should just go back to your original home. There's no reason for me to take care of a 44-year-old adult son now. Hearing this, my son said, we've already terminated our apartment lease. Without a job, I can't pay the rent, and Lindsay's income isn't enough. We have no choice but to rely on you. But I have no obligation to support my son's family or Lindsay's parents. I responded to my son's words, what are you talking about? Find a job, and if Lindsay continues her full-time part-time job, you'll manage to live. Don't make excuses for being unemployed, just find a job quickly. You're the breadwinner, Nathan. My parenting days are over. I have no duty to support Nathan now. My son retorted, annoyed, that's why I'm asking for help, because I can't find a job right away. Then you should ask Lindsay's parents. They're understanding towards Lindsay. And it would be easier for you to live with them, I suggested. Lindsay said, we've sold our parents' house to come here. This is the only place we have to go. I also made it clear, this house isn't mine anymore. If you want it, you'll have to go through a real estate agent to buy it. Seeing their situation, it seemed they really had nowhere else to go. It looks like my son and his wife no longer have a home to return to. But this house is no longer Nathan's home either. I was appalled at their expectation to live with me without my consent. It's audacious not just for my son and his wife but also for Lindsay's parents to think they could stay in my house. Lindsay's parents even had the nerve to say, as parents, shouldn't you naturally take care of your son, daughter-in-law, and grandchildren? That doesn't mean I'm obligated to take care of Lindsay's parents. If you're parents, why don't you take care of your daughter and her family? Besides, Nathan and I cut ties 3 years ago. I've considered my son as good as dead since then. So, I'm troubled by your sudden reliance. The house is sold, and my new place is just a 1-bedroom, with no room for you, I sarcastically replied. Just because I have a spirit of volunteerism doesn't mean I'm willing to support a son and his family with whom I've severed ties. Without a home, there's not much I can do. As a pensioner, there's nothing left I can offer Nathan and his family. I'm already overwhelmed with my own elder care. Indeed, the house holds many memories with my husband. Bought during better economic times thanks to his hard work. And not just with my husband, but with Nathan too, it's filled with precious memories. Is it irresponsible as a parent to disown a son who's over 40, married, and has 3 children? If being a parent still holds me responsible, then perhaps my parenting was flawed. Amidst my heavy heart, Nathan and his family were blaming each other. No one expected I would have sold the house. Selling this house, free from mortgage and lived in for so many years, was a risk at my age. If relations with Nathan hadn't deteriorated, I wouldn't have done it. Lindsay and her parents were furious with Nathan, blaming him for lying. It's all Nathan's fault, Lindsay's parents shouted. Lindsay angrily said, you said Mom would never sell the house, filled with Dad's memories. Didn't you check? Our plan is ruined. The landlord of the apartment where Nathan's family lived was actually a close friend of mine. Curious after Nathan suggested moving in together 3 months ago. I decided to contact her, knowing she was Nathan's apartment's landlord and a good friend. I heard from a friend that my son had been discussing giving up their apartment for months ago. I was astonished by my son's actions, but relieved to have known about their plans in advance. Furthermore, my friend, who is the landlord, told me they wanted to live with me, hoping to offload some childcare onto me, thinking it would be a way to show filial piety while I was still healthy. Knowing this, I started planning how to avoid living with them. At 75, there's no way I can take care of energetic children. And it's clear I'd be saddled with household chores if my son and his wife moved in. Moreover, I felt alarmed at the thought of being completely exploited financially if we lived together. I spent about a week contemplating what environment would be best for me at my age. Considering my physical capabilities at 75, I realized living alone in this large house was unmanageable, as it is already a struggle to keep up with the maintenance. After much thought, I decided to sell the house and move into a senior living community. The community isn't as spacious as a single-family home, so I had to decide what essentials to take with me. Disposing of the rest wasn't hard given my wide social circle. I sold off unnecessary items, furniture, kimonos, and antiques. Even the numerous books my late husband left behind were taken by a used bookstore. Items I hadn't used in years, and those suitable for a charity bazaar at my volunteering site, were all donated. I went to the city hall to gather documents needed for the move, and got all the necessary information. It was just 4 days ago that I finished most of the moving preparations and procedures, including utilities. It was during my last moments in the house, savoring the memories with some sewing, that my son arrived. As I was about to leave the house, my grandchildren, who had been playing upstairs, peeked down, having heard the exchange between me and my son. Urged by their parents, my 14-year-old grandchild accused me. "Leaving your son and us, Grandma, that's heartless." Continuing, he said, "A lonely grandma like you should live with us. And you should give all your money to my dad and mom." Hearing this, my 10 and 7-year-old grandchildren echoed, "Yeah, that's right." It was clear they were heavily influenced by Nathan and Lindsay's teachings. It made me wonder where I went wrong in raising my son. However, Nathan and Lindsay chose their own paths, and their choices are not my responsibility anymore. To my grandchildren, I suggested, "You should ask Lindsay's parents for help. There's no need for it to be me." Nathan replied, "Lindsay's parents have no savings and are barely getting by on their pensions. Our family living with you would make your life more enjoyable." I could only sigh in disbelief. "Nathan, you're an adult. Find a job while Lindsay works part-time. If she's working, you could at least rent an apartment in her name. The landlord of the apartment you used to live in has kept it vacant for a while, knowing we wouldn't be living together. If a mortgage can cover it with Lindsay's part-time job and your unemployed status, you might as well buy back the house," I advised. I contacted the real estate agent after leaving the house. At my age, I just want a lifestyle that suits me. Afterward, it seems my son's family tried to buy back the house I sold. Nathan, cherishing the memories of our family home, apparently went to a real estate agency intending to repurchase it. He presented the address of his childhood home, saying, "I want to buy this property." Given the significant cost, a mortgage approval process was necessary. However, when they applied for the mortgage based solely on Lindsay's part-time income, unsurprisingly, it was not approved. Being unemployed, Nathan couldn't even initiate a mortgage discussion. The house, in good condition and well located, was too expensive for Nathan's budget, making it unaffordable for an unemployed son and a part-time working wife. Eventually, my son's family, including Lindsay's parents, totaling 7 people, managed to convince the landlord to let them live in the previously vacated apartment. The landlord was surprised to learn that not only Nathan's family, but also Lindsay's parents would be living there. My friend mentioned, "As a landlord, having the income secured is good. But I really hope they won't cause any problems." Neighborhood disputes are the most troublesome. Living in the apartment out of the landlord's kindness is one thing, but with 7 people, including small children, it seems the space is too cramped and stress is inevitable. Furthermore, living in such a small space with Lindsay's parents adds to the stress, making their daily life more irritable, as I've heard. An acquaintance living near Nathan's apartment told me, "Nathan and Lindsay seem to be getting more worn out, despite finding a job as a regular employee. Nathan's lack of qualifications means he's not earning much. I'm living in a decent senior-friendly apartment, thanks to the money from selling the house, my husband's savings, and my monthly pension. I spend my days enjoying my sewing hobby, volunteering, and dining with friends. My environment hasn't changed much, I'm living peacefully and feeling happy. Since moving to the senior apartment, I've joined a dance club and am having more fun than before. Being part of the dance club has increased my circle of friends, making every day enjoyable. I've also met a nice man, adding excitement and freshness to my life. While I'm not considering marriage at this point, I find joy in being useful to someone. I feel happy spending good times with nice people. I hope to continue living healthily and happily like this.